streaming The Blind of the New World for Wednesday. Cause yeah, I stream visual novels on Wednesdays. That's what my schedule says. Though my video also says I'm scheduled for 2.5 hour time slots, but I stream for 2 hours, so don't pay too much attention to that. And also, kind of missed a few streams, but you know how it is. You know how it is. Sometimes you just missed a few streams, like 2 or 5 or like 10. I don't think I've actually missed 10 streams yet, but so yeah, let's just hop right into the game and then do that. Make the screen large. Would you like to continue your game? Yes. Did I save last time? I think I saved last time. Yeah, I did. Okay, good. I forgot to do that on the first time I streamed this, so I was worried I had done it again. And that would have been, not very good. Not very good at all. It actually, on the other hand, would have been pretty bad. So yeah. We had been at it for quite a while, so we decided to clean up and head out. The drones must have finished up their landscaping work, because they were nowhere to be seen. The grass and trees in front of this place all look a lot better, but where is the path back? The place looked so different from when I had arrived that I couldn't tell where the path started. It's right there. I even put a little hologram with a sign to make it easier, to make it look a little nicer. You don't see it? Oh, you did, huh? Dangerous. And assuming she hadn't done anything to the area, I had let my guard down. But I actually let the truth slip out there? Not to arouse any more suspicion, I calmly made my way down the path. I was so afraid that I had made a mistake that my whole body was covered in a cold sweat. Thankfully, Cho-hyun didn't question me any further. We made our way down the path, even without that hologram sign. It was quite easy to see the way down now. It was as neat as a mountain trail, lined with trees the whole way down. Almost like it's a mountain trail. Shocking, right? If someone could see this place now, they would think it was a little trail through the woods. But because of the boundary, I don't think anyone but club members will ever find this place. Right, the boundary. She was right, but it didn't make the word sound any less awkward in that context. We continued down the path, heading to the school grounds. The leaves that had dropped off the trees crunched under our feet. Walking through all this, nature actually left me feeling quite refreshed. Our quiet walk was suddenly interrupted by a coughing fit. Are you okay? She definitely didn't look okay. Maybe it's all the trees. My head hurts a little too. You think it's pollen? No way they'd let a bunch of pollen float around in the middle of the city. The Center for Hygienic Conditions would go crazy if they detected something like that blowing around. Of course, there were air filters installed here and there, but the flying bird-like drones had air filters of their own. It would be a miracle if you could find enough pollen to actually elicit a reaction in a person. I skipped over that dialogue entirely. This place is completely unmaintained. Wait. Okay. Yeah, there we go. This place is completely unmaintained, though. The grass comes up to your waist in places. You never know what might be hiding there. It still didn't seem very likely. Oh yeah, this is just a button to hide UI. I didn't skip over it. Could she have gotten exposed to enough after a whole day of stomping around, though? Well, I did read somewhere that if enough grass rubs against your skin, it could easily poison you. I mean, if you're allergic to grass, maybe. But, like, grass? I don't think grass is, like, You'd have to be in a lot of grass and have a pretty bad, like, reaction to grass. Lies. I'm serious. How long do you think I was rolling around in the grass up there? You were rolling around the grass before I came? It felt nice. It was softer than... Ow. Chohyun suddenly flinched backwards and grabbed at her forehead as if she had smacked against something. What's wrong? I glanced around, but I couldn't see anywhere she might have hit her head. We were around the place where the wooded area had entered and the school began. I smacked my head into the wall when I wasn't paying attention. She hit her head against a hologram wall? How do you manage that one? I gently removed her hand so I could take a look. An angry red bump had already formed on her forehead. She must have hit it pretty hard because it was turning purple before my eyes. How did you smack your head against a fake wall? What do you mean? It's weirder that you were just able to pass through like that. No, why are you... Huh? How did you... Huh? Huh? We weren't quite getting through to each other. You had no problem getting through the barrier. Have you been coming through here more often than you let on? What? It wasn't like there was a trick to going through the holograms. A hologram was simply data interpreted and displayed by the electron corneas. There was no actual substance there, thus there was nothing for her to hit her head on. Whether she recognized that as a fact or not, there was simply nothing there. Quite undignified of the club president. Chohyun closed her eyes and took a little leap through the barrier. Hadn't she done precisely the same thing last time? We've already gotten way past the first impression stages, so I wouldn't worry about how dignified you look. Damn. Honestly, my first impression of her had been of a beautiful princess stepping straight out of a painting. Though she did have a few screws loose. What are you trying to imply? Chohyun's eyes narrowed as she studied me. Ow, Ow, the pain's gotten worse. There's no blood, so it's nothing a little massage from a med drone won't fix. Yeah, you're probably right. I stared at the lump on her forehead. The bruise didn't look much like an illusion or a hologram. But how? Good question. How do you hit your head against a hologram? What kind of placebo effect is that? Like the day before, we headed down the hill and parted ways. After dinner and a quick look at my computer as usual, I plopped down on the sofa and thought about what had happened. The holographic barriers were nothing but imaginary walls. But she had bumped into it all the same. She had bumped into nothing but air and data. How? Her reaction and that welt on her forehead weren't all an act. And she had said something about it being strange that I could pass through so easily. I couldn't understand why she'd say that was weird. Because of that painting, she was looking at the world through the eyes of the blind. So what was the difference between us? And how much of her speech about the painting changed her life was actually true? Had that painting really had that profound of an impact on her? Plus, I still couldn't figure out how I was able to see her hologram, or the ones in and around the clubhouse. The longer I thought about Chohyun, the more questions I had about her. That being said, even though I couldn't tell precisely what Chohyun's destination was, it definitely... Whoa. Do I have my audio on? I did not. That explains why nothing was making noise. That being said, even though I couldn't tell precisely what Chohyun's destination was, it definitely seemed like she was looking at the world like one of the blind, like I did. And based on what I had seen, I had no reason to think that she was lying or speaking about that painting with any kind of ulterior motive. Was Dr. Yu Jin going to be able to give me any answers? With all those questions still swimming through my mind, I climbed into bed. I had so many questions, but what if she really wasn't lying? If she was actually gazing into the world of the blind and trying to understand it? This world might not be as lonely as I'd always imagined it to be. Day 4. And it's the morning, so that means we get to see her. Let's go. Like the day before, I left my house early, headed to the hospital to see Dr. Eugene. I was hoping that Dr. Eugene, with her knowledge of the blind in society, would have answers to a few of the questions that had kept me up all night. Having to go see her every morning was actually turning out to be a big help. Well, I think that's probably why she arranged for it to happen. If I was only going to see her once a month like before, it would have been hard to bring these kinds of questions up. Did she somehow know this was going to happen? Is that why she had asked me to come in every day? You're here, splendid. The doctor seemed in a particularly good mood. A rare sight for her. I don't even know what voice I'm using for her at this point. I think it's changed every stream. What's so splendid about it? You told me to come. From the look on your face, I can tell you've got a few questions for me, though. Really? She could read all that from an expression? Got impressive reading. You can tell? Well, it's just a guess. I imagine that you've realized a few special truths during your time with the princess. Just how much did this woman know about me? Well, she is your doctor, so I don't know. It was getting a little creepy if I was being honest with myself. But in the end, it's just you guessing, right? Call it the observational powers of an experienced doctor. You know what they say, with age comes experience, right? Damn. This kid's gonna get kicked. Oh no. Boy, do you know how little I fear the word malpractice? With the idle banter seemingly coming to a close, I decided to switch subjects to what happened yesterday. Idle banter? I think she just threatened your life. I told the doctor about all the drones coming together to clean up the area around the clubhouse. I told her about Cho Hyun's impression of that painting. And lastly, I told her about how Cho Hyun had ended up smacking her head against a wall that didn't exist. Strange, huh? The hologram was nothing but an illusion, but the bruise on her forehead seemed pretty real. No, that's not strange at all. It's actually quite common. Huh? Dr. Eugene's response was something I hadn't expected. It was common? What could she have meant by that? It's like the holograms are very real to normal people. Though the blind may not understand it, a person's senses are more inconsistent than you may think, guided more by belief than by actual logic. Belief? You don't follow? It's more about perspective than anything. It's like that illusion of the rabbit and the duck. I know what picture you're talking about. What does that have to do with the belief? When a person accepts a certain idea as real, the sense of reality gradually turns into a subjective thought and preconceived notions. A normal person wouldn't know if there was a real wall behind that hologram. The girl must have seen the wall at the last second and believed in it. At that moment, as she was about to pass through, she believed she was going to bump into that wall. And because she believed it was real, solid wall, she smacked right into it. That doesn't make any sense. We're not talking about an optical illusion or some trick of the mind. There is no actual substance behind that hologram. Not everyone can see through holograms like you can. Think of this as a form of hypnosis. Everyone is deeply, deeply hypnotized. Though it may be a different form for you, you're no exception. But she was able to pass through the hologram before and after that experience. True, you are right in thinking that there is something special about this girl. Indeed, the more I thought about Cho Hyun, the more I realized how little I knew about her. She'd gone straight through the hologram, and she'd smacked right into it. There was a world of holograms surrounding her, a world I couldn't see. So if I'm getting all this right, she is able to consciously pass through the wall, but unconsciously able to pass through at the same time. Is that about right? Unconsciously unable. Blah. Yep, that sounds about right. That's because of the common sense when she was raised with as a modern human. It's our reality. Whether or not something is real under a hologram doesn't matter. But that girl is such a contradiction that she's able to transcend our reality to pass through. She's a contradiction? Yes, her behavior is strange, but in realizing that fact, she is just showing us that she still judges herself based on the perspective of modern people. That's why she is able to see that her actions are special and unique. In other words, she's just normal? Well, that part is still up in the air, but we can say for sure that she doesn't share your blindness, right? Despite her oddities, her experiences have led her to judge the world in a certain way. There's a fundamental difference between the blind and others. You should know that without me having to explain it to you. I'm disappointed? No. If there's nothing special about this girl, and she turns out to be completely ordinary, what would you do? What do you mean? The question speaks for itself. You think this girl is special, but there's a chance that she just isn't. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm able to see her hologram. If that's what you choose to believe, so be it. But listen here. You can't say that she is special based on such an insignificant detail. You need to think about why you really think she's unique. Why I think she's special? Right. Also, what you see changes the second you start looking at it. Think about why that is, too. What do you mean? It's called the observer effect. I'd heard the term before. The thing being observed changes based simply on the fact that it is being observed. I haven't affected Chohyun at all, though. Indeed, but you should tread lightly. It's not just pictures and drawings that change with perspective. People change depending on how you look at them. Wait, what? My stream is titled wrong. Did I forget to say those changes in the... What the? Why is my... Okay, there we go. It's fixed now. Don't know why it was appearing wrong before. I got back to the school around lunchtime again. I stopped by the teacher's office to show my face for a second, then headed to the Class Collects clubhouse. I took a second to look at the wall that Cho Hyun had bumped into yesterday. No, that wasn't right. I couldn't see the wall at all. I could guess where it might be, though. Most people wouldn't even doubt the wall's physical existence, right? No, I did not want to cancel the current story. That was a misclick. But like me, Cho Hyun was able to see the world, to see it for what it really was. Thanks to the drone's work clearing the path yesterday, it was a much easier climb to the clubhouse. I walked up the path until I reached the clearing where the clubhouse stood. I was excited to feast my eyes on the beauty of the modern world that lay within those four walls, a stark contrast to the dreariness I had become accustomed to. Despite the place looking like a run-down shack straight out of some story, it truly was the window into a modern world that I had been searching for. Sunlight poured down onto the scene, illuminating the spot with the two chairs where Cho Hyun and I had sat together the previous day. But Cho Hyun wasn't hanging around outside like the day before. Maybe she's inside? I opened the door and went inside to find Cho Hyun sitting, brush in hand, in front of her canvas. She seemed to be so absorbed in her painting that she hadn't even realized that I'd come in. All of the windows were open due to the harsh smell of the oil paints, allowing the cool breeze from the forest to flow through the room. A single drop of sweat was rolling down Cho Hyun's cheek. Despite it being quite chilly in the room, she was concentrating so hard that she was sweating. I admired her perseverance. Like yesterday, I grabbed my sketchbook and started drawing. I like that posture. I don't know what I was gonna say there. Just forget I talked. In the quiet of the clubhouse, the only sound to hear was the scratching of my pencil on paper. I thought you were using a sketchbook. That looks more like a canvas to me, but alright. How long had I been at it? Cho Hyun finally put down her brush. Good. Huh? Oh, I'm just talking to myself. I changed some things in my painting. This isn't too loud, is it? Okay, no, it's not that loud. What did you change? Just a little here and there. Anyways, I can't change anything I've done today until it dries. Oh, right. That was the biggest difference between a hologram canvas and a real one. The amount of time you had to wait differed depending on the type of oils and the technique. But one way or another, it took quite a while. Anyways, aren't you supposed to be in class? Why are you here so soon? As vice president of the club, I must say that I was deeply impressed by the exemplary actions of Madam President and followed suit. You're being silly. And you weren't? In the meantime, how about we do something besides sitting around? Like what? Well, how about we try and do something that might satisfy our classical sensibilities? Let's try to act like people back in the day. Hey, what's up, bro? So... people don't talk like that nowadays. But I wanted to say it, so I don't regret it. Maybe we could strike some deep down chord and end up painting something truly magnificent. If we were to act like that. Really? You think we could? I thought this every time I saw Cho Hyun, but it was always like her arrangements didn't quite make sense, and yet they were oddly persuasive for some reason. Of course! What do you think the point of the art department holding art exhibitions and they're trying to foster an eye for art in their students. True. Think about it. Yesterday, we cleaned up the path outside. I mean, the drones did most of the work. But if we had picked up a scythe or something and started cutting at the grass ourselves, what effect do you think that may have had on us? Well, for starters, I think you'd get pretty tired by the end of the day, but we'd probably be so sore that we wouldn't have been able to get out of bed for school this morning. See, this man gets it. Not a dream or a romantic side to you, huh? I was just being realistic. Farmers and the like, that was really hard work back in the day. Yeah? Yeah? You know a lot of really weird facts. What else was a person like me supposed to do? I got curious about this or that and looked up some information about it. Because of my special circumstances, I felt more comfortable looking up facts about the old world than living in the current one. I'm gonna become a professional historian. If we had done all of that work yesterday by ourselves, you think that pain and struggle wouldn't be reflected in our paintings? Well, I couldn't say for sure that it wouldn't. In fact, many artists encountered the tragedies of poverty or illness during their lifetimes. Of course, they weren't all like that, but the more human an artist appeared, the more people were able to relate with that to them. But a long, long time ago, painting was a luxury reserved for the bourgeois, so those paintings wouldn't really have anything to do with farming. You're going back too far? Chohyun let out a very overt sigh. We don't need to go that overboard to see results. Let's get away from the holograms for a while and do something to really satisfy our classical sensibilities. Quite stubborn, this one. Honestly, I had actually come here to be able to see the hologram somehow, not to appeal to any hidden desire to experience classical culture. It seemed like my goals and hers were the exact opposite. At least, that's what it felt like. Besides, I was already living a life overflowing with old-fashioned beliefs and views on things. If I focused any more on previous generations, I was going to start sounding like someone's grandpa pretty soon. Okay, how about we start with something simple, like cooking? The most unexpected of ideas flowed from her lips. Cooking? Are you thinking of becoming a professional chef? It's just, I heard that everyone used to cook at home before. I had read up on a thing called starvation that people used to deal with in the past, but that was another world that had all but died out. In the modern age of genetically modified organisms and mass distribution, there were no hitches in the supply chain for food. People no longer died due to malnutrition. We lived in a world with a plethora of food and a severe shortage of people who wanted to cook that food. Despite the population steadily rising, family units were shrinking, and more people were living alone. People just couldn't be bothered with the hassle of making their own food. As a solution to those problems, 3D food printers and other devices were everywhere. Thus, the few chefs left were highly trained professionals, and it was rare to meet anyone who could claim cooking as a hobby. I was one of the people who lived by the grace of a food printer. While I normally thought of myself as rather old-fashioned, that was one common point that I shared with modern citizens. One thing I will say about this game, I really like the sound design. The music's very nice feeling, just nice and relaxing. Interesting, right? But how do you propose we go about cooking? I'll be honest, I don't know the first thing about the subject. True, how about we start with something that doesn't require us to buy a bunch of cooking supplies? Yeah, you got like no club money. Like what? How about making sandwiches? That was just bread and a few things to put in the middle. I wouldn't really call it cooking, that's a bit too simple. What about making a salad then? All you've got to do there is put some dressing on a bunch of lettuce. That's a interesting way to make a salad. Lettuce with dressing? Usually you use spinach for salad. I guess you could use lettuce, but like... I'm not a big fan of lettuce as a salad. I just like eating lettuce on its own most of the time. You come up with an idea then, Mr. Vice President. Me? Well, to be honest, I wasn't one of the people who really saw the attraction of eating. Yes, I too enjoyed dying of starvation. Of course, I did have a special reason for that. Steak? I had seen quite a few professional chefs cook steak on some old cooking shows. Isn't that another one where you just have to throw it over a fire? That's a pretty normal dish for chefs to cook up, though. I don't think we're going to get our hands on anything that flammable. True. Steak? Flammable? You just, like, sear it. Like, I guess searing is a bad thing to do if you're trying not to start fire. Just, like, put it on, like, a griddle or something. Harder than I thought. Yeah. Also, I don't know about the future world, but doesn't... I guess, yeah, future world, supply of food is easy. Steak probably doesn't cost much. What a world to have. We spent a while putting our heads together, trying to come up with an idea, but we couldn't seem to come up with anything good. I don't know, make a soup. Soup's like the easiest thing to cook. It's not like true, but like, I mean, it is actually pretty close. I find stir fries easier though. But, I mean, in effect, you just put a bunch of like stuff in a pan. It's just a stir fry generally uses more like noodles, and soup uses more whole soup. I just don't have a lot of experience cooking soups. Instead, we ended up getting off track quite a few times, talking about the different kinds of food we liked. Getting hungry. Before I knew it, we had chatted away quite a bit of time. Me too. Well then, how about we go out to eat today? Out to eat? Yeah, eating out at a restaurant. That experience has pretty much stayed the same through the years, right? I don't think they do the cooking themselves anymore though. Sounds about right. Good. You want to go now then? What's wrong? It's nothing. I couldn't think of anything I needed to do. Nope, I was completely free, but probably can't read the menus at restaurants because they're all holographic. We left the school, hoping to find a good restaurant nearby. Since neither Cho Hyun and I were the type to eat out very often, it wasn't easy finding a good place. Unless the restaurant had an older sign, I wasn't able to see what kind of eatery it was, so I let Cho Hyun do all of the hard work and just shuffled my feet along beside her. Of course, I didn't want to look lazy like that, but I had no other choice. I just walked along, telling her what I thought. For example, I told her we should find somewhere with actual employees instead of automated workers, a place where we could interact with the employees as much as possible. All the requests might have started seeming a little suspicious because she was peering over at me rather coldly. Quite the list of demands there. Think about it. Weren't you the one to suggest that eating out would be able to appease our classical sensibilities? If we aren't going with the more traditional system of interacting with real people, then what's the use? Well, you do have a point. That little story came straight off the top of my head, but it was actually quite persuasive. It was all just an excuse to find a place where I didn't have to manipulate any holograms to put in my order. Most automated restaurants used holographic interfaces for ordering. Even if the restaurants had real chefs, if the server was robotic in any way, that normally meant that the ordering was all done through holograms. If that were the case, I wouldn't be able to do a thing without my sunglasses, and asking her to read off the menu and put in my order was sure to raise some suspicions. But when I actually thought about it, I remembered hearing that even these days, most people prefer to interact with real people, so most of the restaurants still employ human servers. It seemed like there was still enough elderly people reminiscent of the old days, and people who preferred real service to keep places like that open. In terms of age, I definitely fell into the latter group. If I had known we were going to go out to eat, I would have brought my sunglasses just in case. I was really kicking myself. In the end, I had no choice but to follow along as Cho Hyun took her time picking a place. Pathetic. Now that I think about it, I believe this is the first time I've gone out to eat with a boy. As Cho Hyun opened the door to the restaurant, she turned and exclaimed her realization to me. Ah, yeah? I hadn't intended to say it like that, but my voice fell a bit flat. I ended up responding rather coldly. What's wrong with you? Am I actually making you nervous? Of course not. I was extremely nervous. Besides all the problems with ordering, I had a much bigger problem. As we went over to our table, I looked at all of the patrons chatting away as they ate. Of course, they were all acting that way. It was probably the same scene that had frequented many restaurants throughout the ages. The only difference, a truth that no one but the blind were able to see, was the look of the food. Oh, that! Oh! Oi! Oh! Ew. Nasty. 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 Ugh. Don't feed people that. Oh. Ugh. Ew. All but the highest quality dishes were made entirely from genetically modified crops and livestock. Since these modifications had no negative effects on the human body, there was no need to worry about the health effects of modern food. However, these genetically modified ingredients had one major flaw when compared to natural ingredients. They looked grotesque. Yeah, you're telling me those things look awful. Oh, I wouldn't want to eat those. Restaurants were no exception. The vegetables were bright red or dark and dingy. The meat cooked to perfection came out a rotten-looking blue. The dressings and sauces reminded me of seaweed in their mess of greens and blues. In a metal platter that had just been placed in front of a customer, a viscous black substance was still simmering away. None of the grotesque culinary creations did much to stir up my appetite. Food wasn't all about the taste. Sure, some of cooking was about tastes and smells, but it was also about the plating. People knew how important the visual presentation of food was long, long ago. People these days, of course, knew that as well. If these people could see what I saw, they'd probably scream at the chef and refuse to even look down at the plates in front of them. But in the world of holograms, this kind of food had all but replaced the dishes of the past. Only the blind were able to see how disgusting it all looked. There was one more reason for the horrid appearance of the food these days, though. Though artificial flavors and genetically altered ingredients were commonplace, artificial food coloring was a thing of the past. What use was food coloring when the whole dish was going to be covered with a hologram display anyways? It was natural for such things to die out. By law, each artificial flavor and ingredient was required to display its own specific color in the holograms, though. Because of that, the traditional ways of cooking still had some importance in creating beautiful-looking dishes. The modern world cared so much for its citizens. They didn't want to force these people to open their eyes and see the true face of their food. Besides, since a lot of dishes shared a few common shapes, they needed a way to distinguish between the different ingredients. Which ingredients were natural and which were genetically modified. There were people who didn't care what they put in their mouths as long as it tasted good, not caring to know whether their food came out of the ground or out of a lab. Others still preferred to have a way of knowing the difference between artificially improved ingredients and natural ones. But in a world where everything looked basically the same and people couldn't see the real appearance of the food through holograms, artificial ingredients were becoming more and more common, and they all looked disgusting. Yeah, that thing looks nasty. The people who cared to see the difference, the people who didn't, neither would ever truly see past the mask. Only the blind like me were hit by that bullet. According to Dr. Yu Jin, at the few restaurants that did use all natural ingredients, I would be able to see what other people did. I would see something similar to what people at this restaurant were probably seeing right now. The irony of paying for something special that any hologram could easily duplicate. They wanted to pay for something they couldn't really distinguish themselves. They trusted people with something they couldn't confirm with their own two eyes. I pondered that thought for a while, and as I looked at the different things the customers were eating, I felt myself getting more and more depressed, and I was quickly losing my appetite. What should we order? We took a seat, and Cho Hyun, fortunately for me, was paying too much attention to the menu to even care what I was doing. No matter how careful I tried to be, I was so worried that the slightest misstep could give me away at any moment. However, Cho Hyun didn't seem to notice anything was amiss. I just needed to be smooth. Mr. Vice President? Huh? The question snapped me out of my thoughts, and I blurted out a hurried response. The menu is right in front of you. You're not going to pick anything? Ah, 1 second. I started looking at the air in front of me, pretending that I was picking something off of their menu hologram. While I had been locked in my own head, staring at people, it seemed like Cho Hyun had already chosen what she wanted to eat. but there was no way for me to see the menu. Just order me one of whatever you're having. You weren't really that hungry then? It's not that, I'm just not very good at choosing from such a selection. You're one of those indecisive types. Not a good habit. It was more like I didn't see anything I wanted to eat while peeking at other people's plates. A little while later, our food arrived. Cho-hyun had apparently ordered the meatloaf for her and I. Of course, the only reason I knew that it was meatloaf was because the server had set down the plates and said, "Here's our famous meatloaf set for the happy couple." Damn. Getting recognized as a couple. I'm afraid we're going to have to be sent to No, I'm kidding. To me it looked like a bunch of mismatched colors all floating in a small puddle of oil. I stared down at the supposed meatloaf, trying to work up the courage to take a bite. A year without the sunglasses, a year of eating rainbow mush. Thankfully, all that time had gotten me used to eating whatever was put in front of me. Still, it was a little difficult to stomach this hot, greasy, thick pile of meat that was sitting in front of me. What had I been expecting, though? Had I actually thought I was going to win the lottery somehow and get the perfect meal with Cho-hyun? I looked up to see Cho-hyun happily eating her meatloaf into bite-sized chunks. It looked like she might start humming with glee at any second. She must have really liked meatloaf. Had I ever looked that happy eating anything? Even when I was young, I would look out of the corners of my sunglasses at the nasty-looking piles of food laid out in front of me and sneer. I was lucky not to have developed an eating disorder after all that. What's wrong? What are you staring at? Wow. Yeah. I had been staring for quite some time, hadn't I? It's just, you really seem to be going to town on that meatloaf. Of course. How do you expect a restaurant to stay in business if the food tastes horrible? Good point. How can I put this so it doesn't sound creepy? Seeing you devour that so happily makes me happy too. You think people in the past had that same feeling? What feeling? I've seen a few old TV shows, and it seems like when someone makes food for their friend and they enjoy it, the host looks really happy too. I couldn't really understand all the feelings of the characters in old movies and TV shows, but watching them did bring out this odd feeling of nostalgia. Is this really an appeasing my need for something classical, though? She looked back and forth between me and the dishes set out in front of us. It definitely feels good. It must be. I think we've finally found that classical something. How good must cooking for ourselves feel then? Should I stop her there? Should I? I really didn't want to start into the topic of cooking at the clubhouse again. Would it be better if I just cut her off here? Mr. Vice President, there's something I wanted to ask you about. What is it? You came by at lunchtime. Did you eat before you came? Yeah, I ate. Judging by when you came, I doubted you had much time for lunch. I left class a little early. I couldn't tell her that I had gone to the hospital. She was a year below me anyways, so there wasn't much chance of her catching me in the act. It would probably be better to think up of a story just in case. Well then, would you like to have lunch together starting tomorrow? Sure, what? You say sure, then you ask what the question was. It was just a gut reaction. Anyway, let's plan for lunch together tomorrow. Huh? What was she getting at with all this? What do you think? Well, it sounds good to me. Good, then I'll see you at the clubhouse for lunch tomorrow. Okay. To alleviate some of the embarrassment I was feeling, I put a bite of the bluish meatloaf in my mouth and chewed, not really paying attention to the flavor. Mealtimes were nothing but chewing and swallowing. What are we going to eat, though? I'll figure out that part. Just make sure you're on time. Strange things were happening. Not like I actually cared about going to class or anything. We finished up our meal and walked down the dimly lit streets. How long had it been since I had been out and about so late? What do you normally do to pass the time? I like to watch some pretty obscure documentaries, or study, I guess. From what I had seen on some of those documentaries, school seemed a lot easier than it had been in the past. In any case, school isn't trying to teach career-specific skills anymore. It was nothing more than mental exercises to equip students with basic life skills and general knowledge about society. Because of that, it was rare just to see students like me who studied in their free time. You sound like my grandpa. What I do is my own business. What about you? I also like to study a bit outside of school. As for the rest of my time, I have my share of hobbies. It sounded like Cho-hyun was also one of the rare breed who viewed learning as a kind of hobby. Considering that she was basically boycotting all of her classes, that was the only way to explain her astounding grades. It's really hard to tell whether we're the same person or completely different. You think? Yeah, what about you? Do you think we're the same or different? Well, it wasn't a bad question. There were the facts that we had grown quite close the past few days, and that she was unable to understand the world of the blind. Besides that, we did have our share of odd similarities. There was simply no other person in the school that got me just like she did. But was that really enough to claim that we were similar? How similar were we, really? Selection! Let's go! Do we get the good ending or the bad ending? Good question. I have to think about things now. We can either... Well, first of all, let's just, save. Pop in a little save point. Gotta do the proper gamer thing. Put a save point at all of the selection moments. How many save slots do we even have? Okay, that's a lot. Well, let's think about it. After this break, to go get some water because I'm thirsty. Oh. Oh. Well, let's think about it like this. They seem to have at least similar interactions for things like an interest in the history of the past. There is no other type of history. That was a just redundant thing to say. I enjoy studying the history of the future personally, actually. They have different personalities, but they do have similar traits. So, do we count this as them having similar traits being seeing eye to eye? I mean, I'd say I see eye to eye with a fair amount of people who have different personalities but similar traits, so we'll go with this. In addition to all her talk of classical sensibilities, she was basically walking the path of the blind. I had never met another person more similar to me, despite not having the blindness herself. The blind and the modern. That difference would always stand between us, yet we did seem to be walking the same path. The tiny little fact that she ran into a holographic wall that I couldn't even see didn't change the fact that we shared a common outlook on life. Yeah, we certainly see eye to eye on a lot of things. Right? Plus, I do seem to be the only one who shares your strange little hobby. Chohyun's expression grew cold. What's wrong with my artistic quest for divine truth? How can you say that with a straight face? Well, I didn't. As we passed the time with meaningless chit-chat, I found myself really enjoying our time together. Day 5, let's go. Let's go. Doctor scene, let's go. Ugh. For the 4th day in a row, I was back at the hospital. Meeting Dr. Yuzhen was beginning to feel like a part of my normal morning routine. That girl really is unique. I see why you like her. Hey, when did I say something about liking her? So you hate her? Do I have to choose between those two extremes? What if you do? Well, I don't not like her. It's safe to say that you like her then? She's definitely unique, and I enjoy our conversations. Well, she's good for you. You want to leave it at that? Good for me? Of course. Seems like you've condensed a year's worth of missed conversations into just a few days. I was about to voice my protest, but I decided to keep my mouth shut. It was true that a year without my sunglasses had basically been a year without a single person to talk to. Since she had heard everything going on during our daily conversations, Dr. Yuzhen was able to make a more objective assessment of my situation. While it was true that I hadn't told her every little thing that had happened during the past year, I couldn't say it had been a year worth remembering. Things have been going pretty well. Each day had been so boring and uneventful that they had started slipping by faster and faster. Had I been envious of normal people and their normal lives that whole time? Yet I could never see the holograms. I never thought I would be able to feel this content in my life without being able to see what normal people saw. My eyes restored and working again. Classical sensibilities. She has a way with words. I still can't wrap my head around it all though. What's so hard to believe? She's exactly like you, yet so completely opposite. You're either one of the blind or you're not. You seem to think of it like this, rigid dichotomy, a simple yes or no. But maybe it's not that simple. It isn't? She was trying to say that a blind person like me was no different than your everyday modern man? Then the hardships I'd gone through were all for nothing? No reason to get angry. You're just not looking at the big picture here. The big picture? Right. There are certain timeless, unchanging truths when it comes to humanity. Timeless? Huh? Your big picture is starting to look quite massive. Call me an idealist if it helps. If you look at the whole timeline of the Earth, much less the universe, humanity's time here is a tiny speck that barely even registers. And aren't you always watching those old documentaries? Scientists were going on about this back in the early 21st century as well. Were they? They were, but despite all that, that girl is special. It's like she's mixing the past and the present in her head. Looks like you aren't the only one able to do that anymore, huh? It wasn't like the thought hadn't crossed my mind. Compared to most people, there was a fundamental difference in how Chohyun viewed the world. And it was all because of a single painting done by one of the blind. She was living in a city of holograms, but she had snuck a peek behind the curtain. How about you take a little tour of the city with this girl? Why? Maybe you can help her please those classical sensibilities of hers. What about this city is classical? Maybe I could show her something a bit more classical without all the holograms in the way. But Curirng wasn't one of the blind. I couldn't see what she saw, even at the outskirts. She would probably just see a different hologram. She'd never feel the incongruity I sensed everywhere. Where people live, there will always be traces of the classics here and there. You really think I'll be able to find those traces anywhere outside of some weird tourist attraction? You'll always be able to find those traces, accidental or purposeful, no matter where you go. And I think you'll be able to find them easier than most. Was she talking about the difference between the center and the city center and the outskirts? Was she aware of those differences? But the holograms erase all of those traces. Of course you know that, but I don't think this girl will be completely blind to the fact either. I couldn't deny that it was a tempting prospect, even though she was stuck in the world of the holograms. If we could gaze out and see the same thing. Of course, if you were to wear your sunglasses, you'd be able to share a lot more experiences without having to worry so much, right? Well, if I had been wearing my sunglasses, I wouldn't have had such a rough time yesterday. I also wouldn't have had such a hard time understanding our current topic, Curirng's classical sensibilities from her perspective. But be careful taking things too far. You know things aren't going to get easier, right? You'd probably figure that out after long enough time with anyone. Okay. It was luck that led you to this girl, but relying on her too much is actually going to be counterproductive. You're implying that I'm already relying on her? Yes, there's a common mistake that people make when they start new relationships. They are way too forceful, always pushing their own ideals. Why are you trying so hard to write our love story? Who knew I was going to be both a doctor and a high school relationship counselor? It was like we were having two completely different conversations. If you don't want to admit your feelings, I'm fine with letting it slide this time. I'm not admitting to anything that isn't actually there. Fine, let's call it there then. The doctor flashed me a mischievous little smile as she wrote a few notes on my chart. At this point, it felt like telling her all of this was just a giant waste of time. Well, there is one more thing. There's always one more thing. It's pertinent that you start considering her perspective on all this. Always remember to be considerate of others. Maybe it was because I skipped lunch on the way in, but I ended up getting back to the clubhouse quite a bit earlier than usual. Ah, you're here. Curirng was waiting for me outside, trying her hand on a little outdoor oil painting. Painting outside today? Yep, I wanted to change things up a little. I stepped over to take a look at her painting and saw that Curirng had been applying another layer on top of the drab grays of the machine city. Was she trying to fix something? What are you painting there? I guess you could say I'm trying to take this in a different direction. Huh? I couldn't quite understand what she meant by a different direction. Hadn't she been going for exactly that look, copying what the blind artist had seen? I realized something after our little talk. Realized what? It's just, I've been trying so hard to recreate that painting. I just wanted to be able to paint a picture that had that same mood and energy. But after our talk yesterday, I couldn't get this one thought out of my mind. What if the artist was seeing the world through completely different eyes? Suddenly, my heart sank to the pit of my stomach. Different eyes? Like a different perspective on the holograms? No, not like that. I was just imagining how this painter might view the world. And see how you look out on the world like no one else does. Your thoughts and actions are so unique, so I thought, could there be some reason why Mr. Vice President and this painter are so different from everyone else? Uh-oh, boy's gonna get found out. It's so hard to explain. When you look at this painting, it's like the artist has an imagination that somehow transcends the holograms, right? Then I imagine how I would have to look at the world in order to paint something similar. Then I realized that more than anything, I need to find something that only I can see, no one else. Then I'll finally be able to recreate whatever went into that painting. You think I might be onto something? I stared at her for a few seconds, completely lost for words. Her goal was never to simply recreate that painting. Through her own painting, she had been trying to understand the mind of a person she had never met before. And now she was telling me that she wanted to see something new, that she wanted to draw a landscape only she could see. What kind of world did I want her to draw, though? I spelled Curirng wrong in the title, didn't I? God damn it. One second, let me fix that. Ah, fuck. Oh no, I spelled it right. I think. What is this about? Yeah, I know how to spell words. Definitely. What did her question and her sudden change of... Why did her question and her sudden change of heart hurt so much? She'd never be satisfied, simply copying what a single person with the blindness had painted. Copying. Well, so you're not going to try to copy that painting anymore? Of course not. At this rate, I'll never be able to paint anything like that. What do you mean? It feels like I'll never be able to follow the painter down the path they're on if I just copy a single work of art. Cho-hyun looked like she wasn't even sure what she was saying. If you just sharpen up your skills a bit, you might be able to paint one better than the original. That's not what this is about. I don't like that painting for its technique. Then what is this all about? I don't want to just recreate that painting. I want to paint a picture just like it. I'm confused. I can see why. We sat there in silence, trying to figure each other out for a bit. And the BGM changed. Want to have lunch? Cho-hyun smiled as she got up out of her chair. Come to think of it, what were we supposed to eat? What do you want to do? Head down to the cafeteria? No, I packed a lunch. We can eat it up here. I didn't bring anything, though. You dummy, I told you to leave that part to me. Of course I packed yours, too. Aw, they're having a lunch date. Cho-hyun went off to the side of the shack. Let me just wash my hands first. She came back a minute later and we sat down in the wooden chairs in front of the clubhouse. Here we go. She grabbed a blue lunchbox that had been resting between the chairs and placed it on her lap. It was a little too plain for a girl like her. I'd expected something more vivid. Quite a modest little lunchbox you've got there. No way, look at how cute and colorful it is. Its holographic skins must have made it look quite a bit different to her. Unlike that clubhouse interior in Cho-hyun's clothes, things I could see so clearly, did that rule not apply to anything she was carrying? I still couldn't figure out the logic behind what I was able to see and not see. You must have different standards for that kind of thing. We might need to have another serious discussion about your artistic tastes then. Cho-hyun looked genuinely shocked by my reaction. It's a sandwich. Cho-hyun lifted the lid off of her lunchbox, and I saw a variety of dishes arranged neatly into compartments. The main course seemed to be a rather large sandwich. I had no idea what ingredients she had used, but it looked edible at least. Edible at least, let's go. Because of the fact that the bread hid whatever monstrous fillings were lying in wait underneath, sandwiches were a staple of my diet, topping a short list of stomachable foods. I bit into the sandwich, tasting a few fresh greens and some kind of deli meat. Foods that looked really strange didn't often taste this good, somehow tricking my brain into tasting something strange as well. How is it? Pretty good. You're supposed to say it's amazing. Why would I say that? Because I made it myself. You actually went through with the cooking idea? There's actually this little cooking club close to my house. Where other people cook for themselves? Right, I've always wanted to go try it out for myself, but our conversation yesterday finally pushed me to go sign up. Didn't we finish up dinner pretty late last night? Despite the wonders of modern refrigeration technology, this sandwich too fresh to have been made the night before. No, I didn't go last night. I went there this morning. Quite the bake from school was what I wanted to say, but didn't. Really? So this is you satisfying your classical sensibilities? That's what all this is about, right? That's right. Chohyun took a big bite, chewed for a bit, and swallowed before continuing her thought. Speaking of lunchboxes, I heard they were designed way back when to help people save time. Yep. Before all of these packaged lunch companies took control of the market, a family member or friend would have to pack a person's lunch for them, right? They must have really cared about the person to take time out of their day to make lunch. How was doing all that yourself? It appeased my classical senses much more than I thought it might. Chohyun looked proud of herself as she said that. About these classical senses or sensibilities, whatever you're calling them, are you sure you didn't make that term up yourself? Maybe it's all about appeasing the artist within. I took another bite of my normal-looking sandwich. What? Just call it a sandwich if it's normal-looking? You think people a long time ago used to think about who would eat their food while they prepared it? I imagine so. These days, all of our food is made by machines. I think I like my way better. To think that all of this was brought on by a single painting. I don't think you'd be very good at cooking, though. Really? Yeah. Well, mealtime for me was like a journey through the 9 circles of hell. I couldn't imagine how cooking would make that any better. Men back then would get married and know that they'd have a beautiful wife back home making meals for them. There must have been a certain romance to it all. That romance is what we call double standards and can sometimes be referred to as sex. But nah. Whoever likes doing the cooking in their family is fine to do the cooking in their family. That's how I feel about it, at least. So just don't, project on other people with that sort of thing, is my opinion on it. Oh, I've read about that. I purposely went out of my research traditional home life. How do you just know about it? I told you before, I watch a lot of old documentaries. You are quite a student of the classics. Still, even if that's how family life went in the past, it's nothing like that now. True. How do you think we got to this point? It's probably because so many people live alone now, don't you think? Cooking is too much of a chore. Back in the past you were talking about, it was customary for people to live with their families. Culture is nothing but a helpless victim, trampled under the march of time. That was a rather dark way of putting it. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. But considering that there are still people who carry on cooking as a hobby, that culture hasn't completely disappeared, right? If you really go down the rabbit hole looking at all the cultures and species that have gone extinct, there's no end. You really do watch some strange stuff. You're talking to me, though. What does that say about you? However, that still didn't make her one of the blind. If anyone was on the lookout for someone truly amazing, though, they could probably just stop at her. Environment played such an important role in shaping children into adults. But even though she had never seen the world through the eyes of the blind, she had been able to expand her view on the world after a stroll through an art gallery. It amazed me every time I thought about it. Wait, flash. Painting. Wait, flash. Shed. The way she understood everything from through one simple painting. My way of thinking, my values, my very thoughts. Was it too optimistic to think that one painting would help her understand all of that? It really depends on the occasion, but sometimes I think you're this normal high school boy, and other times it seems like you're so unique. What's unique about me? Do you consider yourself unique? I feel like that might be the case at times. I almost dropped my sandwich. Maybe it's a case of adolescence syndrome? I don't think that's it. I get another feeling when I hear you talk about things. I had made a horrible mistake. I had known that I needed to hide the fact that I couldn't see the holograms, but I hadn't thought about hiding my peculiar outlook on life that the blindness had brought on. But really? I mean, maybe I've been way too self-conscious in all of this. Have I been acting weird? No, you're not weird. Huh? I said you weren't being weird. I thought I had misheard her for a second there, but she repeated it once more, really driving her point home. Thank you. We had in silence for a while. But I've got to be honest, hearing someone with such an impossibly unique outlook on life tell me that I'm not weird doesn't make me feel very relieved. I shouldn't even have to say this, but I am both perfectly normal and quite sensible. Keep telling yourself that, honey. A normal person wouldn't have fallen in love with that painting. Normal people can't always recognize the true value of art. Only a few people with a real understanding of art and beauty are able to see art for what it really is. Maybe it's you who has a bit of that adolescence syndrome. Silence. I decided to take advantage of the gap in conversation. Casually, I tried my hand. Curirng. What is it? You told me that the whole reason you're painting like that is because you want to know more about the painter, right? Right, and if I happen to paint a piece like that in the process, I'd be pretty happy with myself. I do understand why you think that painting is so unique. She never stopped singing its praises. But what do you think about the person who painted that picture? If she were to figure out the blindness part of it, would that make her like it any less? Shohyun pinned the little fork she had been using between her lips as she pondered that question. Maybe I've got a bit of a crush on the painter? What was that? What's wrong with you? That was what I wanted to ask. While I coughed and tried to keep back from choking on my food, Cho-hyun calmly arranged the containers back into the lunchbox and brought out something for me to drink. Only after a few drinks of the water she had given me was I able to calm down my spasming windpipe. A crush? After I got a hold of myself, I decided to continue my line of questioning. Yeah. But you don't even know who painted that thing. That's true. Then how can you have a crush on them? For the same reason I enjoy that painting. Didn't we both agree the painter might be some deeply troubled person? My first novel simply ended on Oh, that... Is that okay with her? But I really don't see that being the case. So then... The painter, I think he or she is just a little lonely. Oh, so she got a crush on it, whether it's a he or a she. Let's go. I stared at her, for lost of words, yet again. Whoever painted that picture, I think they just wanted someone to be able to see the world as they saw it. She looked off into the distance as she said that. I studied her face as she continued. I think I'm kind of similar to the painter in a way. Maybe that's why I like that painting so much. Something about it screams, "Look at me, I'm here." Cho-hyun turned to look at me. Am I the weird one? I snapped out of it and began searching for the right thing to say, but I couldn't fit two words together. It was like I had been smacked over the head all of a sudden. You seem fine. After quite the pause, I was finally able to get something out. I don't think it's a bad thing to try to reach out and understand someone who might be lonely. I'm glad it's you who's telling me that. A big smile spread over Cho-hyun's face. Huh? Me? Why? Maybe it's just a feeling, but I imagine you're quite similar to whoever painted that. Seriously? Seriously. Why do you think that? Well, right when I laid eyes on you, in front of the school, I felt that. I actually said to myself, maybe he painted that picture. Come to think of it, the day we first met, I had this strange feeling our lives were somehow deeply intertwined. That was why I'd been rather shocked by her cold demeanor when I'd finally managed to track her down. And after talking to you about everything, it seemed like I was able to understand the painter more somehow. I got that same feeling yesterday, too. Really? Yeah, I haven't been able to talk about the painting or share my feelings with anyone. Maybe that's why? Back in the beginning, I was completely unable to recreate the motif that exists in that painting, if it wasn't in front of me as a guide. There was her recreation again. Hadn't she said something about storing all of those first attempts somewhere in the clubhouse? But these days, if I just close my eyes, I can picture the whole scene laid out in front of me. That is pretty interesting. How can I explain this? It's like there's another world shaped just like ours, with a completely different look to it. It exists somewhere just out of view. Whenever I see that world, I get so sad and want to go back to the world I know, but I just can't look away. Ever since being struck by this blindness, I had been searching for that one person. The one person who truly understood what I was seeing. Someone to share my sadness with. That was why I had been so captivated by this girl, hoping she would understand the feelings behind the painting of the blindness. And she was perfect. She had fulfilled every last one of my wishes. She was the only normal person who could fulfill my desires, perfect and unique. The only person who truly understood what the blind felt. The most important person I had ever met in this world. She was able to understand the world I was trapped in. If the painter were ever to meet you, I think they would probably fall in love too. Thank you, but suddenly, why? Nothing. Just a feeling. Yeah? Yeah. We finished lunch and went back to our artistic endeavors. It was rather strange, but there did seem to be a slight benefit in trying something a little more traditional before getting to work on something artistic. In a way, this club came with all sorts of benefits. Just like yesterday, I went back to sketching Cho-hyun at work. It probably wouldn't have been a bad idea to try some oil on canvas work like she was doing, but it had been over a year since I tried my hand at any kind of painting. It just felt too reckless an endeavor to start up without any sort of practice. I decided that I should wait until she finished up with what she was working on and could teach me a few things about painting with oils. After that, I could work on slowly improving my painting skills. Graduation was still a long way off for both of us. It felt better to just enjoy our time together. Yeah, good plan. She would paint for a little while, and then while she was waiting for the paints to dry, she would come over and strike up a conversation. Once they were dry enough for her to keep working, she would return to her piece. Then I would sketch her at work again, or sketch some other interesting thing in the clubhouse. Since I was so bad at holding my own in long conversations, something about the weird intervals actually put my mind at ease. We continued like that, and time flowed on. After a while, I lost focus and put down my pencil, yet her brush continued on. Her painting of the world of the blind was no doubt finished, yet her corrections were seemingly endless. I couldn't even guess which part of the painting she was trying to fix this time. But it felt like, whatever she was fixing, a blind person like me would be able to understand. Because even though she wasn't one of us, she was special, able to understand my situation. Simply amazing. For me, brushing shoulders with people and traveling around the city was a chore. In all that time, I had never dreamt of the day coming when I would feel this way about a person. Had Dr. Yujin known something like this was going to happen? She had said that special personal relationships were the only real cure for the blindness. Would the very existence of a person who's able to understand my plight give me any kind of relief? But as the excitement passed, I realized how depressing my situation really was. It was Friday. In other words, I had 2 days away from school coming up. How could I have been such an idiot? I hadn't realized that simple fact when it had been staring me in the face this whole time. And once again I surprised myself. At first I had viewed coming up here as a bother and treated it like one big inconvenience. But over the course of a few short days with this girl, I couldn't understand how I could have wasted so much time without her in my life. This was the only place where I felt like anyone actually understood me. There were simply no words or expressions that could sum up what this place made me feel. And there was no way for me to describe how horrible I felt not having an excuse to come up here during the weekend. What about the weekend? Maybe it was the sudden onset of depression, but the words just spilled out. Huh? I was just talking to myself. I tried to write off my murmuring as nothing. Why the long face? Nothing going on this weekend? It's not like that. A pathetic excuse for a bluff. Ugh. What did Dr. Yushin suggested? A little tour of the city? What about you? Are you busy this weekend? Nope, I was just going to come up here and paint more probably. You're going to come to school? On the weekend? I normally come to school and paint when there's nothing special going on. Oh, I guess I haven't been up here on a weekend though, have I? If you're not too busy this weekend, would you like to come take part in some club activities? I'm not trying to be pushy, it's just an invitation if you're free. Chohyun's expression was exactly that, an invitation and a hint that she was free as well. You're free this weekend too, aren't you? Besides my plans to paint, I'm totally free. Then how about a little stroll through the city tomorrow? The city? Yeah, just around where you and I live. Where is all of this coming from all of a sudden? Just trying to awaken some of our latent artistic sensibilities. You mean classical sensibilities? You think something in the city will cause some great awakening? There's that word again, but yeah, I think it might. Then I'm in. Where would you like to meet? It doesn't matter where we meet exactly, as long as it's somewhere close. Then how about we just meet here? I need to check on how this painting is coming along anyway. Alright. Meeting up here was the obvious choice. This painting was a visual beacon for me, a place that had a profound effect on my mental well-being. We promised to meet at lunchtime as usual and went our separate ways. For some reason, my lonely dinner left an unpleasant taste in my mouth. It was basically made of the same stuff I'd eaten with Curirng. So why did it taste so gross? Maybe location was like presentation? Could where you eat actually influence what you tasted? Or maybe who you're with? As always, I checked my PC and went over to lie down in bed. I tried to recall the last few moments of our conversation, but I couldn't pull up a clear image. I couldn't tell if I was excited to go on a trip with her, or if I was just glad that I didn't have to spend another day alone. Dr. Eugene was always keen to remind me that I had real feelings for Cho-hyun, but was she actually right? In addition to all those good feelings I got when I thought of Cho-hyun, I really did feel like she held a special place in my heart. But I couldn't tell if that place had been created out of affection or desperation. She was the first person who could really understand me. She was probably the only person who could. My parents, my old friends, even my doctor, no one was ever able to understand me like she could. Even the things she didn't quite get about me, I felt like she would come to understand all that soon enough as well. Maybe when she really started to wrap her head around the world of the blind through that painting, she would be the sole person prepared to interact with me. She would be the only person able to understand my loneliness. I drifted off to sleep with those thoughts locked in my mind. Wow. Full Metal Alchemist. That's what it made me think of. Alright, well, it's a bit early, but I think that's a good point to leave off the stream on. This is... We'll just pop down a save right here. I'll be streaming once again on Friday. So if you want to come catch that live, I'll be on twitch.tv/beastrofig if you're seeing this. And if you're seeing this on my Twitch, then, well, I mean, obviously you just see it on the same channel. But I also have my VODs uploaded to Beastrofig on YouTube. So yeah. Though I think my name's honestly more likely to show up if you search up The Blind of the New World, because it's not very popular. And I have VODs of it there, so you can find me as like the 10th result, I think. Anyways, see you all later.